Well, good morning, everybody. It's the 17th of December here in our one-man control room. I'm Bill Whittle. Good to see everybody here, a few of you live, hopefully more of you recorded. And today's subject is an uphill fight, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, geez, Bill, have you got anything slightly more obvious that you could tell us? But this may not go the way that you're expecting. It is true that we have an uphill fight to the degree that rust never sleeps, that it's easier for weeds to overgrow a garden than it is to keep it filled with roses and flowers, and so on and so on and so on. But the more you think about it, the more you should come to realize that the uphill fight is not our fight. It's the left that has the uphill fight. Gravity's on our side. It's a very difficult thing for us to believe, given how much erosion we've seen and how things seem to be falling apart all the time. But you have to understand that despite the cheating, this country, I think, quite overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. And even if it didn't, even if it was 50-50, it's 50-50 in the face of the left controlling all of the levers of public influence, all of them, and having pretty much near exclusive control of all of them as well. Movies, television, universities, late night comedy, stand-up comedy, music, all of it is blasting the anti-American message all the time, and still it's a 50-50 country. And they've been doing it for 40 or 50 years. So that tells me something. What that tells me is that the table is so tilted. It's so tilted, and yet the ball remains more or less in the center. And that's telling me that they're the ones with the uphill fight, not us. If we had anything like a fair media or fair treatment in all of these things I just mentioned, then we'd win votes beyond their ability to cheat. And see yesterday's episode about that in terms of stopping cheating, called Killing Fraud. But they need to maintain all of these things at full blast all the time, and all the windows need to be papered up, and all conservative commentary has to be shut down, removed, censored, fact checked, all of it. It always has to be kept under as tight a lid as possible. Now, why do you think that is? If we were the ones with the uphill fight and they had to coast, then they wouldn't care. They wouldn't have to censor us because we would be what they say we are, which is an outdated philosophy that's on its way out the door. We would be the dinosaurs. We would be the past. They'd be the inevitable future. So why do they have to constantly censor us, keep our viewpoints from other people, make up lies about who we are? We don't do that about them or any other fringe group. And the reason we don't do that about them is because on some level we understand that not just truth is on our side, but biology is as well, and a lot of other bigger issues too. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about that may not immediately seem clear. Let's go back to late 50s, for the sake of the argument, back when America was arguably at its most moral and restrained and really, at least in terms of mainstream culture, really fairly sound. You've just got an entire generation coming off of World War II. You've got all this prosperity and so on. So towards the end of the 1950s, you get this guy from Tennessee named Elvis Presley. And the entire country goes nuts. The young half of the country goes nuts because they're seeing and hearing something that's a lot different than Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. And the adult side of the country goes nuts because they see the sexuality that Elvis is bringing to music, and they realize that this rock and roll thing is a real danger. Okay, so yeah, it definitely is. But if you think about 1958, 59, or whatever, early 60s, what you've got is you've got the traditional family that is trying to put the brakes on the biological imperatives of young people. Biological imperatives of young men and young women has been to fool around. And that continues to be the case, although certainly to a lesser degree. So the enemy of biology was good parenting, and that's appropriate. I'm not arguing with that aspect of it. But who's the enemy of biology today? Who is it that young people biologically have to fight against today? Well, they have to fight against the social justice warriors. Those are the ones that are that are restricting their behavior. It's the progressives that are telling everybody how to behave now. We're not telling them anything. It's the progressives that are telling them, no, 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 no. You have to come on. If you're going to go out on a date, or even if you're going to walk over to a woman sitting there in a bar, you're going to have to come with a sheaf of papers, and she's going to have to initial every single one of the steps, and you're going to have that notarized. Otherwise, you're going to get accused of rape and so on. So who's the enforcer here? And who is the one who is providing this constant, ongoing meddling in the lives of people? Who's the one that's irritating the living daylights out of people? I guess what I'm trying to say is, does anybody ever really think about the reason that saying get woke, go broke is so obviously and dramatically true? Why? Why is it? It's just the fact that it exists. There's no discussion really about this. This get woke, go broke thing is absolutely true. It's true across the entire culture. Gillette makes an ad saying we're going to have to be better men, and we're going to have to stop violence against women. And Gillette loses $1.5 billion in sales or something, which still has not recovered because of one lecturing commercial. I know I beat this drum an awful lot, but it's part of the big picture and it's part of hope for the future. So I'm just gonna pound on it again. When beloved. These are more than cultural icons and certainly more than TV shows. The modern mythology of America is the pop culture. Every single culture in history has had a pantheon of gods or some kind of interplay and classical heroes. It's always been there. You need them. Biology needs them. That's why the left has got the uphill fight, is because they're fighting against biology. Every culture, every society needs its heroes. And, true enough, America produced heroes of its own in my lifetime. It produced modern heroes in my lifetime. There used to be people like Babe Ruth and so on, Charles Lindbergh and all the rest of them. But in my lifetime, as I've been aware, I've seen two major semi-religious events in the society. I've seen the creation of two entire mythologies that have permeated pop culture to such a degree that you could in many ways call them, if not a religion, then without question a cultural identity. And the first one was Star Trek and the second one was Star Wars. These are bigger than these aren't just movies or TV shows. Star Trek changed the minds of hundreds of millions of people worldwide and in America. Same for Star Wars. They were so beloved. They were so much a part of people's core identity. They were so instrumental in their youth and in their teens and into early adulthood that they were absolutely treated with religious relevance and reverence, especially in a world where every single day it becomes more and more and more socially unpopular and now impossible to be a Christian or a deeply religious person of any faith. So these things that seem so trivial to so many people, I still run into this with many conservatives. It's a TV show, but why are you wasting your time on this? It's not a TV show, and it's not a series of movies. It's much bigger than that. It is the cultural glue that binds a society together, is their stories and their culture and their heroes and their myths. And in the 1960s, Star Trek, and then in the late 1970s, Star Wars, came along and provided not just a piece of entertainment, but a belief system. And that belief system filled that biological yearning that people have to believe in something bigger than themselves. Why is it that you think now you can go out and see 30-year-old, 40-year-old insurance people who have little Star Wars figurines on top of their computers as they sell, life insurance policies to people? Why? It's because it filled a biological need, and that religious need that people had been pushed out of the culture aggressively by the left. So, if the left is in fact the future, if the ball rolls downhill towards left-wing values, then what we should have seen is that all of these allegedly toxic, allegedly patriarchal, allegedly racist, allegedly misogynist, all of these mythologies should as they moved left, as all of these became woke, the audiences should have gone up. If their theory is correct, and this is the theory that they constantly sell the studio executives on, if the theory of left-wing wokeism is correct, then number one, the existing cultural norms and mythology should see an increase in popularity as the mythology becomes more and more and more left-wing, more and more woke. We'll get to how untrue that is in a minute. And secondly, we should also see, if they're correct, we should see a new paradigm, I hate this word because it's much bigger than this, but right now it's all I can think of. A new franchise, some new cultural phenomenon in the pop culture, in our entertainment, because we live by stories. Everybody lives by stories. We'll get to that a little more in a minute too. There should be a woke mythology that is growing in number because they're claiming more and more people are more and more progressive as they get older, and that's not what's happening. And this is the beautiful thing about being able to take a step back and look at things from geostationary orbit instead of down in the trenches here. Let's just take a step back, and look at what people spend their money on, because the nice thing about spending your money as a general rule, you get to do that in private. You have to go out in public, you have to go to college, you have to go to school, you have to go to work, you have to deal with the water cooler conversations, you have to deal with Facebook posts, you have to deal with all those things. But as a general rule, so far, I'm sure this is their next objective, but as a general rule, what you do with your money in your own time, in your own house, is still pretty much a secret to the other people. Tech knows all about it, but the rest of the population doesn't really know what you're doing. And so we need to look at how people are spending their money and where their money is going and where it's not going, because that is an indication of where their minds and hearts are. They are voting with their dollars because these are the things that they love and these are the things that interest them, and they're voting with their dollars as well if they start to steer clear of things that they find repulsive. So if gravity favors the left, if it's Americanism that has the uphill fight, then this is what we should be seeing. If their theory is correct, we should be seeing NFL viewership go way up, because if they're correct, then all of these woke politics that they're bringing into the NFL and the NBA and all the rest should appeal to a wider audience and bring in people who hadn't watched football before, because now they're coming because they realize, oh no, apparently it wasn't as racist and misogynist as I thought. They're down with the program. So we should see the viewership for those things going up. We should see, as I said, we should see a brand new series or mythology or franchise or something that celebrates woke values of collectivism, radical femininity, gender fluidity, all of these things. They should be popular and growing more popular. If they are correct, they should plug into society in the same way that Star Trek and Star Wars did, because those two things filled a hole in the pop culture. They filled a hole in the lives of people. Star Trek gave people a hope for a future in the middle of the Cold War, when we had to go to bed every night. I will tell you in all certainty, from the age of 11 or 12, once I began to think of things bigger than baseball and bicycles and girls and stuff. Once I became aware of the world as it is, from the age of 12 until 1989, 90, when the Soviet Union came apart, I didn't think I was going to live to see my 30s. And most of you who went through that probably didn't either. If you were alive and aware in the 60s and the 70s and 80s, you grew up with this idea that you are not going to see your adulthood because nuclear war is going to take us all. It's been long enough now so that seems almost like a bad dream. And as a guy who wrote a 13-part history on the Cold War, on some level it was a bad dream. And on another level, it was a victory of enormous proportions. And that also contributes to my theory, but I'm going to leave that out. So Star Trek gave people a world where even though included in the backstory of Star Trek, there wasn't a nuclear war on Earth, it gave people the hope for a future where everybody gets along, where science and engineering and technology and faith in yourself, faith in your culture, faith in the Federation, all of those things were deeply, deeply needed by the American people. They needed to see something that would tell them that there is a future beyond Tuesday, when the sirens start and the duck and cover drills aren't drills anymore. And Star Trek moved into that enormous hole and filled it to the degree that it changed people's lives. Now, if I could pan this camera around in here, now I decorated this back in 2014, but right over there's a picture of Captain Kirk in his chair, looking badass. Here are 3 different renderings of 3 different kinds of Enterprise. Right behind the camera, there's a publicity shot from 1966 of Kirk in front of the Enterprise with a phaser, and all around the room, it's a museum to Star Trek here, because it had that effect on me and on other people too. For those of you who are saying, what has this got to do with politics and the election? You got to stay with me on this, because this is it. 20 years go by, or 15, 10, whatever. And then in 1977 along comes Star Wars, and Star Wars gives you something else as well. Star Wars gave you something that the 70s didn't provide you with, and that was excitement. It's a weird paradox about the 70s. The 1970s were at once the period when you're sure you were going to die, and at the same time was the most boring, bland, unimaginative, stupid decade in American history. I recall with crystal clarity, a friend of mine who was much wiser than I was at the time. We were in one of those custom vans that were so popular back then. My friend Charlie Allen had a big van, and he had, just a big metal moving van, and he did the whole thing up with the captain's chairs on the, rotating captain's chairs and carpet all through the back and cushions, this booming sound system, all of this stuff. We were just driving around the neighborhood in Coral Gables, Florida. And my friend Lee said, you realize, right, that we live in the most boring time in American history. And kind of shook us a little bit. It's like, well, he said, yeah, it's 1976. We're not going to get drafted. Doesn't seem like there's going to be any big wars. Nothing we can do about the atomic thing. There's no upheaval, really. There's no rioting in the streets. All the 60s protests have gone. The number one rock and roll song in the country, as I recall, was "You Light Up My Life" by was it Debbie Boone, I guess? That was the number one pop rock song in the country, and it was horrendously dull. And along comes this thing, and all of a sudden it's like, no, we're blasting through warp speed and all these aliens and all this. It gave people some sense of excitement. And so it moved in like a protein binding onto a molecule and produced another cultural tsunami. So far, so good. Now, if you fast forward to somewhere in the general vicinity of 2011, 12, something like that, you have progressives now being able to intimidate businesses, because as social media starts to come online, as the peer pressure of Facebook and Twitter and all the rest no longer becomes a dispute between me and the guy who runs Cracker Barrel at a local restaurant. Now it's between me and Cracker Barrel Incorporated. And if I've got a following of 50,000 people and I tell Cracker Barrel, I'm going to have 50,000 people at this restaurant with signs saying that your company is racist if you don't take down that Florida State banner there, because I went to the University of Florida, so make up your mind, do it one way or another. And to our enormous disgrace and to a large part of putting us where we are, they decided to play it safe, and that's what they did. They just kept backing down. So by the time we get to the 2010, 2012, 15, that general ballpark, the left has intimidated businesses, pop culture, and they've intimidated everybody into thinking that we have to do what they say. By the way, if you want to know how all of this stuff started, how cancel culture started, it's actually very linear and very direct. Cancel culture, the ability of saying, I don't like what you say, so therefore I'm going to organize social media to put you out of work. That you can draw a direct linear line from where we are today back to Jesse Jackson and this Rainbow Coalition in the mid to late 1980s, where Jesse Jackson, I'm not exaggerating now, Jesse Jackson would find some local business in a neighborhood or something like this, some bank or some grocery store or something. Let's just say it's a hardware, something bigger, some kind of a department store or something. A bank is better, okay? And this is precisely what happened again and again and again. And this is how the whole thing started with, what was the name of that program? Doesn't matter. Jesse Jackson would basically find a business in a town, and it's just a shakedown. It's a simple criminal shakedown. These things have been with us since there've been people. Nice nice urn you have there, Jeremiah. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. And basically, what would happen is he would identify a target, and then he would go there in person or send his subordinates and basically say, we don't think you're hiring enough black people. And if you don't hire 12 more black people, we don't care what they're doing, you just pay them. Then I'm going to have 150 people here saying it's racist, and I'm going to have them in the lobby of your bank screaming that you're racist. I'm going to have them here in an hour. And as always, whenever a committee makes a decision, the committee will make a decision to cause minimum risk. Committees are built to CYA. That's what they do. And so the various boards and the managers and so on backed down, and they did what they said. And the more they realized that this works, it's blackmail, pure and simple blackmail. But it worked, and it continues to work. And so so some advertising company goes to Gillette and says to them, you have to change your branding because young people don't buy into this whole, masculine guy with a beard shaving. No. You got to go completely woke if you want to stay in business. And the people who run Gillette listen to them. Now, whether or not the people in that ad agency who made that pitch for a woke commercial for Gillette razors believed what they said or not, it didn't matter, because what they really wanted to do was to destroy this entire idea of masculinity anyway. So using the Gillette thing as just one example, a small one too, the people who ran the business, who were responsible for the business making money, came to the conclusion that becoming woke, becoming actively aware, and broadcasting left-wing values would increase their market share, or at the very least would stop it from hemorrhaging. And God only knows that if they'd actively rejected them, what would happen to our brand if this woke blackmail squad decides that we're on the enemies list and starts to go after us on social media and accuse us of whatever they want to accuse us. They'll accuse us of anything. They have no morals. So, like most strong-arm schemes, they basically just went along with it. So then you get this woke commercial, and then, however, now, once that commercial is out there, now you're no longer dealing with people who are going to college and saying, no, I'm down with the whole thing. Patriarchy is horrible. And I'm ashamed of being a white male and heterosexual and all the rest of it. And I deeply, deeply apologize. And if I could just find some black people here, I'd take a knee right now. You could put handcuffs on me and I'll show you exactly how conforming I am to your miserable standards. But. When those people get home, they spend their money on what they want to spend it on. It turned out they didn't want to spend it on Gillette razors anymore because the philosophy that they're selling is repugnant to people. It's repugnant to themselves, and it's also deadly to themselves, and we'll get to that in a minute too. So on a larger scale, in order to prove this theory that I have, let's look at what happened with Star Trek and Star Wars. I'm not going to go too deep in this because I talk about it a lot otherwise, but it's important to understand this as we move forward trying to recapture our government and save the country. The values espoused by the Superman radio shows and the 1950s or early 60s TV show with Steve Reeves, those were American values, and all of these things sold. And Star Trek was the bridge of the Enterprise is America. You've got a black woman here who's capable. You got a Russian guy. You got a Japanese guy. You've got a Scottish guy. That would be Scotty. You got a Vulcan. It's a multicultural world before the word multicultural was ever invented. 10, 15, 20 years before it was ever invented. You had this microcosm of America on the bridge of the Enterprise where everybody's getting along, everybody's educated, nobody's got an attitude. There's an episode of Star Trek where, one of their worst episodes, where Abraham Lincoln comes back to fight this battle, and Lincoln is on the bridge of the Enterprise, and Uhura comes up and hands Kirk a message, and he says something like, "Oh, what a charming negress," or something, and he realizes that's an odd thing to say, and he says something like, "Madam, I'm terribly sorry. I certainly didn't mean to offend you with my 19th century ways. I hope I caused you no offense." And Uhura looks at him and says, "Why would I be offended by that? We're all proud of how we look. We're proud of who we are. We don't take offense at things like that. And then Lincoln says, well, you've come a long way. And you have. Let's not forget either that Star Trek was the first biracial kiss in America. There was an episode called Plato's Stepchildren, where these super advanced creatures, and this is on a point, believe me, can control people's actions. They make them think about things, and they can dance around and make them be puppets and all the rest of it. And the script called for Spock, who, as you probably know, is pure logic and no emotion. The script called for them, because they're toying with them, they're using the crew of the Enterprise as playthings. The script called for them to use their psychic powers to make Spock kiss Uhura. And he would be forced into it because it's such an emotional, intimate act, and she wasn't in a big hurry to kiss him either. So, that's the script. They get to the location, or the day before, but I think it happened on the day of the location. And Shatner comes in and does what he always did on that show, and that is throw his weight around. And Shatner said, if there's going to be a interracial kiss on television, it's going to be Captain Kirk. It's not going to be Mr. Spock. So he inserted himself into the script. Now, even though they still had kind of a sort of a fig leaf in a way, because they were being forced into it. They were being, literally, they're like, she's here, and it's like, try to resist. Nevertheless, that was the first interracial kiss on television. And the CBS executives, was it NBC at the time, said, we want a second take. We want a take where they don't kiss. We want a take where they get close, but they don't kiss. They managed to pull back and resist the thing. And we insist on it. And they said, okay, we'll do a second take. And they did a second take where they didn't kiss. And during that second take, to his credit, William Shatner just made all kinds of faces with his eyes that the executives couldn't see. There was no way to use that take. So they ran the episode. Star Trek got canceled. It got cut off in mid-show across certain stations across the South. And a lot of letters came in. But my point is in all of this is this. That was genuine. I'm not going to use the word progress with that. Okay, it was progress without progressivism. That was a real step forward. And yet another indication that this mythology had power in America, that things were going to get better, that the racial issue was not getting worse, it was getting better. And 200-300 years in the future, it's gone. It doesn't exist. Uhura's not offended by being called a negress. She's not offended by anything. You can't say anything that would offend her because she's confident in who she is. She has the respect of her crew members. And that was the future that was coming. And that's why people loved it. In Star Wars, you have a slightly different situation. Star Wars provides unbridled adventure in a time when the culture was so bland and the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit was there. You've got this country that is 2,000 miles wide, and you've got stretches of Texas that or Nevada, you can't see the horizon, a straight ribbon of 4-lane interstate highway. And Jimmy Carter is saying, well, you can't drive faster than 55 because we don't have the gas. We're out of gas. We got no gas. And driving the Florida Turnpike at 55 miles an hour, which I've done more times than I care to remember, I've blocked it out, is a form of torture. But that's what we had to do. So Americans started developing things like CB radio, and Convoy became a crazy hit. On AM radio, when Convoy came out, the C.W. McCall song, they were playing Convoy on the radio every 15 minutes. Every third or fourth song was Convoy. Those were the calls they were getting for it. And you get this whole CB thing, and people are, Breaker 19 is here. And why? Why? Why did that happen? Well, it happened because of the same reason that Star Wars fit that time. People were tired of being told what to do. They're tired of being told that there's no future for the country, that we have to slow down, that we have to, wear a sweater, and we have to all these things, and just prepare yourself for the inevitable decline. And for teenagers or young men that are doing 55 mile an hour on the Florida Turnpike in a sports car because there are state troopers every other mile, even the radar detectors were sometimes not effective. Although we had two of them. We had three of them, two facing forward and one facing rear. So why do we have the radar detectors? Why didn't we simply go along? Why didn't we just drive at 55 miles an hour? That's what we were told to do. That's what was good for the country. That's long before that was good for the planet. We were told to drive 55, so why didn't we? Because we don't like being told what to do, and we know how fast we can safely drive on this road, and we just hated it. And we rebelled against it with CB radios and radar detectors. And along comes Star Wars, and what happens in Star Wars is a cocky guy shows up in a hot rod and runs like hell. If you really think about it, in the original Star Wars movie, Han Solo running from the Empire is basically Smokey and the Bandit, which is another iconic film from that period. So is Cannonball Run. The idea that no one's going to tell us what to do, we're going to drive as fast as we want to, and the Millennium Falcon is going to burn rubber and get the hell out of there and outrun the pursuit, went to our core. And these are why these things became as popular as they are. Now, by the time we get into 2013, 14, 15, the left has managed to intimidate virtually everybody, partially through the carrot and partially through the stick. The carrot is telling Disney executives or whoever, or CBS executives, that the audience that liked what Star Trek used to be, what Star Wars used to be, is getting older and older and older and older and older. And if you want this cash cow to keep producing cash, you're going to have to change it so that new people will come into it and keep it rolling. Now, that pitch makes sense. If I'm an executive and I don't know anything about these things other than how much money they make, somebody comes to me with that, I say, well, that actually makes sense, yeah. So what are we going to do? We're going to do a new show? No, what we're going to do is we're going to invert the shows. What now? Yeah. We're going to make Star Trek from something that's got a very positive future into something that has a very negative future. We're going to turn something that it had racial harmony as the outcome of humanity's natural growth into one that's filled with nothing but people trying to enforce their, sexual fascism on things. And we're going to have, the ship's going to be powered by a guy. He's going to be a white guy, and he's going to cry a lot, but don't worry, he's got a boyfriend of color. And then there's going to be this black space Jesus who was a sister of Spock, who, and all of this with Star Trek Discovery. And the executives have no idea what's going on. They're not part of this. Sounds great. Let's do it. And they did the same thing with Star Wars. It's just going to be you're going to have another hero like Luke Skywalker? Well, we're going to have a woman who's exactly like him, except she's much better. Oh, really? Yeah. She won't have to learn how to do things. She's going to be perfect at everything because she's a strong and powerful woman, and that's going to appeal to women. Well, what about the guys? Oh, well, they'll love it too. We'll have plenty of action and plenty of other stuff. Okay, well, let's see what happens. So you get things like Star Trek Discovery, and you get things like the Star Wars. The Star Wars final trilogy. Now, it's been openly admitted more times on camera than I can care to mention. So this is not up for discussion. Sometimes names fail me in the middle of these things. This is annoying because all of you will know the person that I'm speaking of, and it'll come to me in a second. But the woman that George Lucas had hired, Kathleen Kennedy, to run Lucasfilms when he sold it to Disney, she went over to Disney and became the executive producer of these last three Star Wars movies. And she's a radical feminist. And so she cast somebody who looks like her and gave her superhuman powers and insisted that everything she does better than anybody. She can fight with a lightsaber even though she's never picked one up before, and defeats the Lord of Darkness with ease in the first movie. She comes upon a spaceship she's never seen before. She's never flown a spaceship before, but she's a much better pilot than Han Solo because she's a woman and she's powerful, and this will give women something to aspire to, and on and on and on and on and on. And then in the second movie, we get the introduction of an actual woke character who is nothing other than a social justice warrior on board a rebel spaceship. And she's complaining that the people in the casino on the rich planet, these are the worst people in the galaxy. That's a direct quote. You see all these rich people and rich aliens gambling, and they're all in their black ties. And she's looking at them. She says, those are the worst people in the galaxy. And I'm thinking to myself, they're worse than Darth Vader. They're worse than the emperor who blew up an entire planet and murdered billions of people, and then they did it again in the movie just before this, where they knocked entire planets to death and killed billions, probably trillions of people. And these guys down here gambling are the worst people in the universe? Yes, because that's the message that the social justice warriors like Kathleen Kennedy and Ryan Johnson put into the series. And now we get to the point, because they didn't look at Star Wars as something that they loved, and they didn't look at Star Wars as something that people loved. They looked at Star Wars as a pill, as a capsule that they could put their philosophy into. And they've seen how many people love to swallow those Star Wars movies. And they thought that if we put this woke progressive philosophy inside this capsule called Star Wars, people will ingest it, and then they will become what we want them to be. They'll become, the men will become timid, and the women will become strong, and the patriarchy will fall, and we'll just keep hammering them until they get the message. And that's exactly what happened. And the movies didn't just not do well compared to what Star Wars used to be. As this situation got worse and worse and worse, the people who have YouTube channels dedicated to nothing but Star Wars and Star Trek began to get more and more angry, and then they became furious, and then they became kind of in a, all right, screw you kind of thing, and walked away from the thing that they loved the most, and now they're at a point where they just don't care. That's dead to me, I don't care. Same thing with Star Trek. It used to be about a hopeful future, now it's about a dark future. It used to be about people working together, now it's about the black space Jesus of color and all the rest of it. And so they've injected their woke values into pre-existing cultural mythologies, thinking that since these mythologies have such deep cultural penetration, all we have to do is change the color of the dye that we're sending out, and then people will turn from red to blue because we're going to send out blue in these messages. And if they're correct, and if the premise that conservatives are fighting an uphill fight, and that the idea of Americanism and heroism and all those things are dying virtues, then young people should have taken to those movies with an incredible amount of enthusiasm. If that entire theory was correct, then young people should have been flocking to them, should have been like, oh my God, this is fantastic. Well, there are minor cult followings for both the Star Trek prequels and the Discovery, but generally speaking, both of those franchises are dead. Star Wars Galaxies, before the pandemic, had to let go of employees at Disneyland because there were not enough people coming to a Star Wars ride at Disneyland. Not enough people attending it. Lines and lines and lines for Pirates of the Caribbean. Nobody's going to see the Star Wars ride at Disneyland because they had poisoned that well so effectively that Star Wars fans said, not only don't I like this, but this is so repugnant to me that I'm walking away. Luke Skywalker was my hero, the farm boy who through effort and skill and bravery and courage and setback and setback and setback and setback becomes humble enough to master his powers and becomes a Jedi and saves the galaxy, and now he's a bitter, cranky, angry murderer who's drinking green cow milk on some deserted island. He's a coward. He's a misanthrope, and he's despicable. And he was drawn that way on purpose because the left-wingers wanted to absolutely destroy the idea of a young male hero fighting against authority. That had to go. And so people left Star Wars, and people have left Star Trek. And they've done it because nobody wants what these people are selling. They won't take it for free. People who have grown up on Star Wars will not go and see Star Wars movies now. They boycotted the last the last Skywalker, and they boycotted the Solo movie specifically to tell the people that had shoved this down their throats that no, we're not taking it. And furthermore, we don't appreciate being called misogynist. When you would bring out Rey, who's a Mary Sue with infinite powers, you bring out Mikey Spock and she's got infinite powers. When the fans protested, the studio said that's because you're racists and you're misogynists. And the fans said, well, if we were racist and misogynists, we wouldn't have liked Captain Sisko, we wouldn't have liked the original Lando Calrissian, we certainly wouldn't have liked Sarah Connor, and we wouldn't have liked any of these female leads. We wouldn't have liked Ripley and so on. So you're lying and you're doing it. So I go into the pop culture thing because it is critically important, and I run into this problem with my viewership, which includes many of you, who think that this is trivial, that this is just not serious business compared to the election. And I am here to tell you that this is the most serious business, because young people, without question, are being socialized into becoming socialists. They're being pressured into becoming socialists. They're being told that if you are male, then you're a defective girl, and if you're white, then you're an automatic racist, and all the rest of it. And the power of that peer pressure is so strong that virtually every single one of them is agreeing and trying to find some way to genuflect even more aggressively than they had before. But when you leave them alone and let them spend their own money, what you find is they don't want it. They will walk away from something they love rather than listen to woke politics. And there's a great anger against woke politics among young people, great anger, and a great sense of injustice, as if somebody had stolen something from you or killed a pet that you loved or something like that. And it's out there and it's growing and it's palpable. And that is because the left has an uphill fight. The anti-Americans have the uphill fight, not us. They have the uphill fight. Now you know why they have to control all the messages. That's why they have to shut down any kind of anything that doesn't go along with the woke propaganda message, because it is against human biology and it is against everything that makes people happy. It's against the idea of hope. It's against the idea of racial harmony. They claim to be fighting injustice, but without injustice, there is no left. There is no modern left without injustice. And since there's not enough injustice around, they have to manufacture their own synthetic injustice. That's why all these hate crimes, oh my God, somebody painted a swastika and they carved MAGA into my forehead while I was walking home. Well, turns out you did that to yourself. Turns out that the injustice that you've accused others of is not only not there, it's so not there that you have to manufacture evidence in order to show it. And by the way, if your claim that a bunch of Trump supporters carved MAGA into your forehead while you were heading home, and giving you don't forget the racial slurs and the gay slurs and all the rest of it, and there's a noose hanging in my garage in my race car garage as a warning to me as a black driver in NASCAR and all the rest of this, and the Jesse Smollett, all of it. It's manufacturing injustice where there isn't any injustice, because number one, where would they be without injustice? They're protesting nothing if there's nothing to protest. And secondly, it makes them rise in their social status. In a philosophy that's predicated on victimhood, if you have been attacked by the right-wing Nazis, then you go to the top of the class. You are a celebrity. You're a star. And that is why all of this stuff is happening. But here's the takeaway. They are the ones that have to do the work on this, not us. Young people, when you leave them alone, rebel against every single thing that they're fed every day and have been fed their entire lives. And that's not going to change. Their willingness to take a knee to it in public is there, and that will increase. And their willingness to maybe vote for socialists or talk about socialism, I'm not saying that's not real. They do believe it. But they believe it because they've been taught that that's what good people believe. But when you leave them alone, they want nothing to do with anything that has these values. And as I've said before, I got started in computer games. I rode the whole wave. The first computer game I ever played, I played on my high school systems computer after hours with a guy who knew what he was doing, and I played a Star Trek game that had a teletype, wasn't even a monitor. Klingon warship, 60,000 miles, photon torpedo fired, miss. Klingon fires disruptor, 6 damage points, just putting it out. I've seen the whole thing. I've been there from start to finish. And the one thing I know about computer games is that computer games essentially consist, all of them, consist of two activities. You make money and you buy guns. And that's all you do. And the more money you make, the better guns you buy, the better guns you have, the more money you make. And as I've said, I like to buy guns and I like to make money and I'm a conservative, and this leads me to the conclusion that young people, the people that the left is so utterly dependent on and so sure belong in their pocket, basically spend large amounts of money so they can go into a quiet world in their bedroom, lock the door, turn on the TV, and find a world where they get to act like conservatives, where they get to drive fast and blow things up and shoot Nazis and parachute out of airplanes and chase hot women and all the rest of it. They can't beat the biology out of people. They're the ones with the uphill fight, not us. And that's why they have to maintain this ongoing barrage of constant propaganda. And we need to understand how unbelievably optimistic that message is, how unbelievably optimistic it is for us. Because it's not a problem. Now it's just an engineering problem. You know, the difference between an engineering problem and a physics problem is something that's impossible. An engineering problem is something that's difficult, but there is a way to do it. Getting people to agree with woke values is a physics problem. You cannot get people to do it. Have you ever met or imagined a more unhappy group of people than these social justice warriors? Have you ever seen a group of young people ever in your lives that miserable all the time? No, me neither. That's why they're such a small percentage. That's why they're so despised. Biology is on our side, and biology doesn't change. And people want heroes, and they want adventure. No matter what Kathleen Kennedy says, young men don't want to see a 5'2", 100-pound woman knocking down 250-pound security guys with one quick punch or flying kick. They don't get a kick out of that. And you know what? The women don't either. Because women, as a general rule, do not aspire to being able to kick ass in a street fight. And they have to be able to kick ass in a street fight, according to woke philosophy, because if they can't, then there's a fundamental difference between men and women. And if there's a fundamental truth out there, external to my insistence, then if I can't insist upon reality bending to my will, this Natalie Portman's going to beat up The Rock, which is coming, if it certainly exists in any number of things that we've seen so far. If that's not true, then maybe socialism doesn't work, and maybe all of this gender fluidity is insane, and all the rest of it. So, the takeaway for this episode is this. It is an uphill fight. It's an uphill fight for the future of this country, and it is uphill for them, for the anti-Americans. They're the ones that have to do the work. American values are things that people want, and they want them all around the world. And when America was the dream factory for the entire planet, when the original Star Wars and Star Trek and all the rest was coming out, people around the world wanted that, because everybody can want to be with this young guy with a fast car and run from the cops and do the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs, or whatever the number actually is. So, be of good cheer. We have an engineering problem ahead of us. But for those people out there who say the future's lost, we're losing the future. We're losing the future because we're allowing these people to continue to engineer like crazy. But physics is on our side. And we don't have to do an awful lot of engineering, because gravity is on the side of America. American behavior, American ideals are what people want, and anti-American ideals have destroyed everything that they've touched. That should keep you warm at night. Since I believe that the war is a culture war and not a physical war, I get more satisfaction knowing that young people are buying a video game like Red Dead Redemption Part 2 and spending $55 million in 2 days, $550 million in 2 days of sales to buy a video game so they can play cowboys and Indians in peace without being hectored by Karen or any of the other social justice warriors. That gives me as much comfort at night as being tremendously heavily armed does. And it should be the same for you too. Now, there's a lot to talk about in the future in terms of how to get there, but in these dark days, I thought I would give you a moment of genuine, honest to God, more than hope, conviction, fundamental geostrata, granite bedrock conviction that life is on our side, that the future is on our side if we decide to actually get up and do some engineering, that no matter what they tell you, nobody wants what they're selling. And that's why they have to cheat. And that's why they have to steal elections. And that's why they have to cover their news stories. And that's why they have to protect Hillary Clinton and Hunter Biden and all the rest of it. They have to do all of these things. They have to squash stories. They have to kill Facebook groups. They have to strangle the videos that we make here, because they know that nobody wants what they're selling. And the only way people will buy it is if that's the only story for sale. So in the end of it, what you get basically cultural communism. You can have a loaf of bread if you stand in line, and it doesn't matter how fresh it is, and maybe the bread won't be there, but if you want to eat tomorrow, then you need to stand in line, and that's that. In the Soviet Union, you stand in line for bread. You come to America, the bread stands in line for you. You go down the grocery aisle, and there's 60 different brands of them, all waiting for your attention and your money. So gravity's on our side. They're the ones with the uphill fight, not us. That's good news. That's the best possible news. So we'll see you tomorrow right here on Moving Back to America. By the way, a large number of people have made one-time donations, and significant numbers of people continue to join and become members. And for all of you, I just want to tell you how much it means to me in these dark times, how much comfort I get out of it, not just because it allows us to continue the work. We've gotten one-time donations of $1,000, and we've gotten a one-time donation of $2. And they mean the same to me. I value them equally, because what that's telling me is many, many, many of you are doing what you can. And in these demoralizing and dark times, this is a source not only of opportunity in terms of the message, but of enormous emotional comfort and confidence for me, and for all of us as well, all of us here. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for those of you who stepped up. If I could answer every single donation personally, I would. Most of them don't even have an email address I can respond to. But I want you to know that we are exceedingly grateful. My phone dings every single time somebody makes a donation at BillWhittle.com. My phone dings. And every single time we look in the office in the morning and see the membership numbers go up, we are very, very, very grateful. And me especially. And you have my heartfelt thanks if you're one of those people. Heartfelt and deep appreciation. And we hope we'll continue to do work that's worthy of your confidence. We'll see you here tomorrow, Friday, right here on Moving Back to America.